Whenever you're ready.
All right. Go ahead
Seth,
and
you
call
let
the
me know
meeting
when
to
you've
order.
got it. Seth, you let me know when you're ready. We'll
We're ready.
proceed.
Hey, Seth, before you start, can you cover this for me? What's Barracuda? Not right now, just part of your presentation. I'm sure it'll come up,
I thought it was finished.
because I get from Barracuda than anybody else.
Looking down.
So welcome to your January 19th workshop. We have 3 items on the agenda today for discussion. The first one is an item that was bumped from, I think, the October meeting. You had asked for Seth to give an update on our IT, our software, and our cybersecurity measures. So I've asked him to present that to you. And then Tiffany Farrow is going to give an update on the transportation planning projects and DOT projects that are in the works. And then, as I've let you know via email, Phil Bogan, our downtown director, has been promoting the now vacant planning department building behind City Hall for lease, and we've got a proposal for that. And I'll go over that at that time. So, and I haven't heard from Councilman Turner. Hopefully he's on his way. But we'll go ahead and get started since it is time. So I'll turn it over to Seth to give an IT update.
This is going to be our technology, software, and services update. First thing we'll cover was the new workstations and monitors. We deployed more than 60 workstations over the past 18 months. We replaced devices that were between 6 and 10 years of age. Replaced devices that were no longer supported by Microsoft, which that alone was a great security risk to our network. Once they're no longer supported, we don't get security updates when Microsoft is notified of potential backdoor entry into systems and computers or software. And just overall, we improved the network security of our network. We deployed more than 70 new monitors over the past 18 months. We had some devices that were between 6 and 15 years of age. These new devices have lower energy ratings. That's resulted in lower power consumption. And they also have modern screen technology to reduce strain on employees' eyes, which is, that's helpful, especially with the blue light effects that we get from a lot of the more modern monitors. Next up is going to be our new network components. We replaced more than 10 network switches and firewalls over the past 18 months. Some of these devices were extremely old. I found some switches that we had in the network that were around 20 years of age. Those were definitely no longer supported and getting firmware updates from manufacturers. But the youngest devices I found were somewhere around 10 years of age, which still that's far too old when you're dealing with network security. We improved network-related performance and implemented VPN-capable equipment. That VPN-capable equipment is what allowed us to have a seamless transition to remote work when the pandemic hit. We did have some minor hiccups, but for the most part, speaking to some of the other municipalities in the area, we were able to transition fairly easily compared to what they were dealing with. There are still quite a few municipalities in North Carolina that are still not operating completely remotely. And these, of course, greatly improved our overall network security with those firewall replacements. And I don't have a dedicated slide for the Barracuda within here, but I'll touch on that a little bit just per the request of Councilman Tripp. So Barracuda ESS, it's a type of sentinel for emails. We have the ability to put in certain parameters to flag certain emails that may be considered phishing. So if any of you have ever seen an email that appears to come from Adrian, it'll say something along the lines of, I want to purchase a gift card for somebody. Please contact me directly. Please don't say anything to anybody else. A lot of times those are phishing. We actually did have one instance where somebody responded to one of those and actually did purchase the gift cards, but did not provide them to the individual. So we were able to stop that before that happened. But that's essentially what Barracuda is. It also flags viruses, malware, worms, adware, anything that can be sent through an email. It helps flag that and prevent it from making it to our network. Sometimes it can be a little aggressive. We've had some instances where normal emails don't make it through just because of the wording. But we do have capabilities to go in there and adjust that per vendor to make sure that those don't get flagged in the future. But that's been a huge improvement over what we previously had. We didn't have anything like that in place. Next up is going to be our unified cloud surveillance devices. We installed these at 3 facilities over the past 18 months. At these 3 facilities, we have a total of 15 devices. And we also have a planned project awaiting installation here at CityWorks. We have already pre-planned in the planning process of the Parks and Rec Center to include devices there. So we'll have a total of more than 60 devices between here and the new Park and Rec Center once we get that into place.
What about parks? I had thought there was some talk about having security cameras installed at parks in the past.
Currently, we do have some solar cameras at the parks. Those were installed prior to my involvement in doing this unified cloud surveillance. Zip has expressed to me some frustration with those, especially with the cost involved. I actually am working on a project plan to potentially replace those with these surveillance devices, which potentially could lower cost and give us a better product at the same time. So eventually, when I have some time to get around to that, I'm hoping to be able to put these at each of the parks, and it'll make it a lot easier to manage.
This might just be a silly question, but isn't that something like CPI Security could come out and set up for us, or?
So with CPI, we would have a monthly fee that we would have to pay. With this system, I basically do all the setup, and I do the installation and configurations. Once we do that, there's no monthly fees.
Okay.
So once we have it into place, there's just that upfront cost of hardware, and then it won't cost us anything additional other than an internet connection past that point.
Great, all right.
Right, next up is going to be our Connect Reveal Fleet GPS tracking. So far, we've installed this on over 50 devices with an additional 20 planned. The graph over to the right is just to give you a general idea of some of the features that we can see once we log into the portal. We can track location, speeding, harsh driving, idling, wasted fuel, service reminders, travel routes. This has also provided our supervisors with some much needed insight into travel habits, costs, and work patterns within their fleets.
This is a good accountability tool.
Yes.
I'm sure the employees are.
I'm sure they love
They're
it.
thrilled.
I remember I used to work at a bar and they installed a POS system. That was very popular.
Old school.
And of course, along with this did reduce our theft-related risk. I'm sure you're all aware that we had that one truck that decided to go missing sometime this past year. So hopefully that will cut down on that possibility again, or at least let us know where it's at a little bit sooner. Next up is going to be our WaterSmart customer portal. This was implemented almost 2.5 years ago. We have a 57% registration rate at this point. Almost 60% of our utility customers have registered for this and utilizing WaterSmart in some way. This has provided citizens with detailed usage, statistics, and tracking. It's also improved the overall experience by allowing citizens to set their own parameters for being notified of possible leaks. That graph on the right is actually from the citizen-facing portal, so when they go to their reports, it will show them trends and graphs about their usage. And they can actually set the parameters for the time frame that they want to see that. But we'll also let them break it down into hourly usage if they click on the graphs if they'd like to see that. This also provided us with an additional mass communication tool. We can send text messages to utility customers through this system. We can send mass emails out through this system. We also have a call feature, basically an automated call system where we can set up calls to go out through this system as well. So it's been very useful not only to our utility billing department, but overall to the city as a whole. Next up is going to be our Icompas. This was implemented a little over 3 years ago. That was prior to my involvement. But I'm giving you just some highlights from speaking with the people that were involved with this implementation. This provided a transparent portal for our citizens to see detailed information about our council, board, authority, and committee meetings. This also helped lead the transition to digital documentation of our meetings and the information related to that. It also provided a collaboration tool for departments to add their specific information individually, and this also streamlined the agenda creation process.
Which, when I got here, we used Microsoft Word to write up the summaries of things. We had to print out everything in a packet, and the clerk would print, I think, 12 copies of each agenda item and all the backup material, put them out on the dais at City Hall, and then go through and put it together and collate it. And it took us between typing out all the materials, printing it, gathering it, collating it, and then putting it in the binders and delivering it. It was about a 2 to 2.5 day project every month. So this is much easier. And now that we're digital, you know, it's seamless. As soon as the agenda is ready, we just hit upload, it sends it out to you. So that's how we're able to provide the agendas a week sooner to you, and a lot more efficient and better usage of staff time.
And you don't kill a small forest or something.
Exactly, yeah. Some of Shelley's meetings, we would have, you know, packets for this thick, so. It offsets the tree save ordinance.
So, Mark, that's a good point. That's, I guess you could chalk that up to a greater technology as well, so. Right, next is gonna be our iWork software. We implemented the public works suite of iWork within the past 18 months. I was involved with that implementation. It's a cloud accessible and hosted to reduce IT-related costs and storage, security, and improved our reporting and data tracking capabilities for multiple divisions within public works. For example, we can individualize certain job types, see how much that's actually costing the city. We can include the employee salary within those reports to see, you know, how much we're paying per hour for each employee that's on the job. We have material costs that can be included. So there's some really good data that we're able to gather from using that software. It also provided us with a customer-facing portal for self-reporting of issues around town. That's actually a snapshot of the customer portal there on the right. So when somebody visits our website and they go to the services tab, if they click on report tall grass or something of that sort that's listed in that list, it will take them here. They can sign up if they like to track the ticket process when they put one in, or if they want to go forward as a guest, they can do that as well. You just won't get the tracking feature. And of course, we have a planned launch of a citizen text reporting tool within the coming months. That's part of the iWork Public Works software as well. So we'll be able to set up a text message system where if somebody is, you know, driving around town, sees a pothole or down tree, any number of things that our Public Works handles, they can actually text that number. It will automatically be translated into our system, and that will show up as a work order waiting to be deployed out to somebody in the field.
What's that phone number?
I can find that for you. It's currently in a test state. I have programmed and set everything up. We just haven't gone live with it. But I'll be more than happy to get that for you and let you kind of play around with it if you'd like to do that.
Maybe start with us as part of the test,
Okay.
and then,
Good idea.
That's a great idea.
and then, I mean, just post it everywhere whenever it works.
Yeah.
I'll get that to each of you.
Oh.
All right, up next is going to be our code enforcement suite. This was implemented prior to my involvement. This improved our tracking reporting tools for code enforcement. It syncs with our public works citizen portal that was added afterwards. So now when citizens go in under code enforcement, they can do reports directly from that online portal. It will sync up the text system as well. So those will be filtered and sent in specifically to Lindsay, which is our code enforcement officer. So she will get email notifications each time there's a citizen that reports an issue, so that she can quickly address those as needed.
Can citizens track the status of the code enforcement case in here?
If they go through the online portal and submit it through there and sign up for an account, it will show them a ticket number that they've opened up, and they can return and sign back in and see the status of those.
Okay.
The text tool might give you a status update, but if you go through the online portal, it will.
Bless you.
I just know that's something I get a lot of questions about, is like, I called this in a
Right.
month ago and just wanna know where it's
If you
at.
direct them to that online portal, and have them start using that, they can definitely track the process of it and see the
Okay.
status that it's in. This also streamlined the violation process. It includes easy to assign forms that tie directly to that related property and citizen. So for example, in an instance where, you know, Chris retired and we had Lindsay come in because of the way the system works, she was able to immediately get into the system and see what he already had to process, the violations that had been put out, certain addresses. So that made her process a lot easier when she came in for that position and take over for Chris. Lastly is going to be our permitting and plan review software suites. This was also implemented prior to my involvement. I believe this was one of the first suites that was implemented by our planning department. This improved their overall workflows and processes, as well as reduced the steps involved in the permitting and plan review process. There have been some difficulties in the creation, process of new forms, and the applications. These forms have to be set up by iWork. And as you can see in the last two statements, we've had some issues as well with our GIS system. iWork and Gaston County don't play well together. They quite frequently, each has stated they do not like working with each other. So we have not gotten updates in several months. We're supposed to get quarterly updates, and I think that's maybe happened twice. We've been on that software for, gosh, Shelley, what's that? Probably about three years or so.
Maybe 3.
Okay. And part of this is iWork staff does suffer from some inefficiencies. They're constantly hiring, and it seems like they have a lot of turnover. I've expressed our disdain quite frequently to our account manager. It's kind of fell on deaf ears, and Tiffany's had quite a few issues with him as well, trying to get some things taken care of. The good news is if this does continue, it's a software as a service model. We're not locked into any contracts. So if it does get to the point where we need to seek something separately, we can do that pretty much anytime we want. Do you have anything either of you would like to add about our?
Sure, so on our end, we believe in the spring, summer, fall, launched the permitting portal through iWork, so now we have a customer and developer friendly portal similar to Public Works that people can go online and apply for zoning permits and sign permits. We've streamlined that process now to one form that they can do through iWork for most zoning permits. So that has really helped a lot with efficiencies in tracking and processing time. And then we just, at the beginning of this month, did a soft launch of our developers plan review form. And so now, if they're submitting even bigger projects, they can do that all online and then just provide paper copies after an online submission. So after much back and forth, we were able to get to those points. And so we're excited to see how those actually work moving forward.
Next is going to be our Jamf mobile device manager. For a city our size, we do have quite a lot of mobile devices between phones, iPads, and really we didn't have any kind of tracking system to easily keep track of which employee has what device. We also ran into some situations where when an employee would leave, they, for example, would have the activation lock turned on their phones, which made it difficult for us to get back into those. That has resulted in some phones being unusable due to that activation lock. This system that we implemented is very inexpensive. It's only about $2 per device per month. What that allows us to do is we can remotely track these devices if they're lost or stolen. We can remotely wipe them. We can massively deploy new applications to these devices. If we get a new application that employees are going to have to use, we can automatically send that out to their phones. And of course, if there is an activation lock, this gives us a lock key that we can use to override that so we can still use those devices and they don't get into an unusable state. But this has been a really good tool for me. It's really streamlined my process of deploying phones out to employees. Before, each time I would get a phone, I would have to go in and manually do a lot of settings, manually set up the accounts, keep track of each individual's passwords. So it's a very long, drawn-out process, and now I don't have to really worry about too much of that. I just turn the phone on, set up their city email and Apple ID, and then once I do that, I can pass it off to them.
Technology.
This is one of our newest deployments. The next is VoIP phone system. We were previously on Verizon's VoIP phone system, which if you were to speak with a lot of the departments, quite frequently would go down, poor call quality. We had a lot of issues with that. We didn't have a lot of customization options for hunt groups and auto attendants and specialized call groups that direct certain calls to certain areas. This new phone system is going to give us some really advanced tracking. We'll be able to see how many calls we get per day. We break that down to see how many are going to each department. We'll have some really good tools in there as well to see how many calls are being missed and that sort of thing. But at the same time, this also gave us a virtual fax system. So we're able to move away from an actual hardware fax. We'll have essentially a fax system set up where if somebody faxes our number, it will automatically convert into a digital fax, and it will go to either a secure download box where we can log in and access those files, or it will come directly to an email system where we can get that as well.
Ryan, do you and Mark know what a fax machine is?
I think I saw one in a museum once.
Yeah. It's like a paper email that you feed it. So we're doing away with those.
Hey, hey, guess what? One of my friends emailed us really funny. She was reading a story, Dr. Seuss story to her grandson. And it was talking about TikTok clock. And so nobody's done anything about TikTok except apps. Yeah, we're not gonna do about some things.
You know, this digital fax stuff's been out for 10 years.
Yeah, well, we wanted to make sure it was gonna be reliable.
Making sure all the kinks were wore out of
Yeah.
it.
We want to be cutting edge, not bleeding edge. We figured if it's 10 years in testing, we'll take it.
The good news about the virtual fax with their systems as well is we have HIPAA compliance. So Deborah, for example, will be able to send documents back and forth a lot quicker instead of having to wait on that long fax process. She'll get notifications of when those emails are arriving. She can even set to have those give her a red notification, much like an email that you can do within Outlook. So there's some really useful features there. The biggest thing that I was looking at when we made the decision to switch to this provider was reliability, because we've got a lot of issues with that with the Verizon system. They have a 99.99% uptime rate. They have not had an unplanned outage since, I believe, put in there was maybe 2017. So any outages they have been planned. They notify several weeks in advance to let us know when they're going to have to do a phone system update or anything of that sort. Typically, it takes place after hours. So in most cases, our citizens won't even notice that there's an outage when that takes place. But we're really looking forward to that. We've actually already implemented it. The Public Works Department is live with it, the Administration Department, utility billing, planning and zoning. I have a partial deployment at the water plant, the wastewater plant. I plan to finish that up this week, along with the police department as well. But if you call, you will get one of the newer phone systems right now, a call system if you call the main overhead number. We have the ability to customize and change that pretty much freely at any time. Before, we had to send off our request to a company, wait on them to record it, set up the automated call transfer system, and that usually takes several days for an update to take place. Now we can do that within about 30 minutes or so.
This has a lot of accountability measures built in. So when we have a question of, I keep calling, I can't get anybody, well, we can track down, we can see, what's really going on there.
We can break it down by department if needed, or even specifically to certain employees as well. So there's
Can you record conversations for quality control?
that is a feature. I currently do not have it turned on for everyone. Most likely will not be turned on for the police department. We'll have to speak with them separately about that. But there's a couple different ways we can set it. We can set it to always on. We can set it to where specifically if that person, for example, a detective, if the chief were to approve this, we can set it up to where they just press a button on their phone, they can immediately start recording conversations, so there's some good tools there as well.
But we could turn it on if there were certain numbers where we had concerns, we could activate it for those specific numbers, right?
Yeah, we can freely activate them anytime we'd like to.
For employees working remotely, is this integrated with like their computers so they can dial through their laptop, their home, or?
We have two ways that we can do it right now. I've left this up to the discretion of the employees that are working remotely. The easiest way is to do the phone app. You just download an app on your phone, install it, sign in with your username and password. All of your calls automatically route to your phone. It'll pop up, say Nextiva, that way you'll know it's coming from the Nextiva application. Any calls you answer or make through that application will not expose your personal cell phone numbers, so that will take care of that as well. If they would prefer a software suite be installed on their computer, we can do that and provide them with a headset. So there's two options there as to how we can do that.
Okay.
All right, next is going to be our Proud City Web Services. This new website was built and implemented within the past 7 months. This improved the overall user experience for our citizens. It improved our ADA compliance. Our previous provider really did not focus at all on ADA compliance. That's becoming a much larger issue. There's already been some cases in Florida where there is an attorney who is suing just about every municipality. And from what I understand, he's been winning every single time, just because their ADA compliance is very poor. In most cases, if we can show that we had a very specific effort to make it as good as possible, I've seen a lot of cases where that seems to stand up in court. But if you're nonchalant about it, not focusing on it at all, which a lot of those municipalities were that he was targeting, it seems to be a lose almost 100% of the time. So that was one thing that I was looking at when we chose to go with this provider.
In what way is it not ADA compliant?
So the ADA compliance on websites, a lot of it has to do with the way that your links and buttons are displayed. If they're not displayed in a certain way, the software that somebody uses who may need that ADA compliance can't pick up on the buttons. If you have a lot of images, like image-heavy content on the pages, you'll notice we kind of cut down on that in a lot of the body, as opposed to the previous website, if you remember that one. Image-heavy content can cause your ADA compliance rating to go down because those programs have difficulty deciphering between what's an image and what is text. Because of the way that it reads that program, it kind of reads it within like an HTML code, and a lot of that looks very similar. So our ADA compliance score currently based off of their ratings and then some external ratings that I've done, we're generally between a 75 to 92% compliance, that's pretty high. Unless you go to an ADA compliant company, you're seeking 100% compliance, that's a really good score to have. For us to seek 100% compliance, we would essentially just have to have web pages that are nothing but text and specific links. We wouldn't really be able to do a whole lot of images. Most of the time, they're going to be aware that no company is going to be able to really thrive with that. So generally, between 75 to 100% is considered pretty acceptable. So we're in a good spot as to where we were. Previously, we were only somewhere around, I think it was 35% when we did some initial testing, so we've jumped that up pretty good. We improved the overall security of our web pages and content with this new web provider. The web design tool is a lot more responsive. It's very easy to use compared to some of the other models that we have. There are certain aspects of it that are a little bit more difficult compared to the previous provider, but you can have a little bit of that handoff when you do a transition like that. But overall, it's much faster. That was one of the issues with our previous website, is it was very unresponsive when we get in there and try to make changes. The biggest thing that we liked about this is that it has automatic device render and scaling. That ensures a very good experience across multiple device platforms. So whether you're accessing it from a desktop like a 24-inch monitor, or if you've got a desktop hooked up to your 65-inch TV, or if you're doing it from a smartphone or a tablet, it's always going to have the best render automatically without us having to do any kind of additional setup for that. There's no long-term contract agreements with this provider, which is one of the things that I focused on as well. With our previous provider, we were locked into, I believe, a 5-year contract. So once we were given that previous website, the design was what it was. We didn't have really any free control over making major adjustments to it. We just had to live with it. We can only change the actual contents of the verbiage and the images that we can post within, certain body parts of the pages. So that was one thing that was frustrating, is we didn't have very much control over that. So with this, we're not locked into a contract. We can freely change the layout and setup of the website anytime we would like to do that. And because it is software as a service, anytime they do updates or periodic improvements, we get those without any additional costs involved. This is just an overview of our previous survey that we did before we made the change to the new website, and the current statistics of the most recent survey that we did. So you can see that we have a 75% approval rate of the new website being a good representation of Belmont, as opposed to a 27% rate on the previous survey. 86% reports that the new website is easy to use, whereas 50% previously reported that it was. 93% report that the new website loads quickly, whereas 68% previously reported that. And of course, 85% of surveys report that the new website provides a pleasant experience on a mobile device or a tablet, whereas we only had 27% with the old website.
How often should we be updating our website? How many years?
So with this platform, we can technically update it every year if we wanted to. We can go in and change the banner images, we can change the general overall layout, we can change the button customizations. So really with this, we could do it as often as we would like to. I would say we should do a major update, probably every 3 years or so, just to keep things fresh. But for example, and we're going to try to possibly get into that some this year, the color themes and things that we have set up on the website, if we wanted to really get festive, like around Christmas, we could adjust and do, red and green trim and that sort of thing for the buttons. Halloween, we could do, you know, oranges and blacks. So there's a couple different ways we could really kind of tweak the new website and kind of get fun with it. We didn't have a whole lot of time to focus on that this year, but that is something that we're looking forward to try to do possibly this year. We can even change the banner images as well around Christmas to be, you know, Christmas photos of the downtown area and really highlight that.
Hey, Parks, how often do you update your website?
Once. But I still think Barracuda's a song by heart from the 70s.
And I apologize, this is a previous image of the old website, for those of you who might not remember exactly what that looked like. This was just a snip we took right before we took it down. And this, of course, is the new website, when you go to the homepage, just a quick snip of that. All right, next is gonna be the Payroll HR System. This was implemented over 2 years ago. That was also implemented prior to my involvement. This condensed the payroll and HR functions into one single software. It provided a tool for tracking employee acknowledgement of policy changes and other company related materials. It also provided documentation tools for HR items such as employee education, merit evaluations, hire-related documentation, and position changes, so we have one easy place to keep track of that per employee, as opposed to having a lot of paper documents just kind of floating around out there.
Sleep over there.
Yep, just trying to go to sleep, there we go. All right. The payroll portion provided easy access to employee time cards and PTO, provided supervisors with a detailed view of their respective employee information, streamlined the time card approval process. From what I understand with Time Clock Plus, there was quite a bit that was involved for our previous finance director to go through each month to approve those time cards, and there was a lot that they had to individually check to make sure that things weren't missed. Now with this new system, there are flags and notifications that go up ahead of time, letting you know if there's a supervisor who still hasn't approved time cards, so you can address that ahead of time. The one issue and complaint we've had with Paycor is on the payroll portion. It's been the Time Clock mobile app. We've had some continuous issues with it, such as difficulty of installation, missed punches. Paycor reports that we're not eligible for their latest updated mobile app due to some of the features that we require. That may change in the future. They claim that they're working on trying to get that more broad spectrum, but we can get it. If we do get that new application, that should cut down on the issues that we've had with the time punch app that we're having right now. It seems to be just an issue with that older application that we're having to use. So once we can transition off of that, I expect that should improve. The admin software suite, this was chosen and implemented by our previous finance director. It was originally called Evans MCSJ. Shortly after we transitioned, the name changed to Evans GovTech during a merger that took place. They're located in Northfield, New Jersey, and they currently handle our finance and accounting, utility billing, miscellaneous payments, and our Park and Rec citizen portal. We've had quite a few issues with Edmunds. Employees report the accounting portion of the software is difficult to use when entering purchase requisitions or purchase orders. The process for entering new meters, taking payments, setting up new customers, closing accounts, pretty much anything utility billing related has increased in the processes that are involved to do each of those tasks. So that certainly has put a hindrance on the way that they used to operate previously with the old system. The Edmunds Parks and Rec Citizen Portal, that is still not functioning as promised almost 6 months after it was launched. There continue to be issues with, I know there's some issues with it kind of marrying up and syncing with the actual payment portion, so payments are not actually coming into their own system properly, and they don't seem to have a fix for it, which is concerning. So, the finance and accounting module, it is not compatible with our Paycor system. We've not found this out until after the fact. So that's resulted in manual entry of all payroll deductions into the Evans Finance and Accounting module. That is taking up a lot of our new finance officer's time, Langston. From what I understand, I think, Adrian, you maybe mentioned we were a few weeks behind or possibly more than that because of that going into the system.
Yes, more than that.
Okay. So that's really slowing down the process, and causing a little bit of a hindrance on us really having detailed information about certain budget items for payroll. So that's a pretty major issue that we're facing right now. Their support is not very responsive. They like to pass blame. A lot of times when you call them, the first thing they say is, well, it's your internet and it's your software, it needs to be reinstalled. And typically they'll just tell you they can get off the phone, they don't really do a whole lot of digging. We have done everything repeatedly that they have said that we should do to try to appease them, to make sure that we're doing our part. Issues still continue with some of the other modules such as utility billing when they're trying to pull certain reports. So it's not been a very good relationship so far. And due to poor service and support, complicated user experience, incompatibility with our other software offerings, currently, in my opinion, my recommendation would be that we seek an alternative software provider to replace Edmunds. I don't think that's going to be a good relationship. They don't seem like they're very interested in meeting our needs or correcting the issues that we have had. I've had several phone calls with them to this point, emails back and forth. I know Langston has spoken with them. I believe Kevin has possibly spoken with them some at this point as well. It's not a good relationship at this point. If we are to do that, I would say we need to involve employees from each of the departments that will be affected by this change in the process when we interview replacement software companies. From what I understand, that really didn't take place when we were interviewing companies previously. We made the decision to go to Edmunds. So our main goal really in this replacement process would be to focus on not only our employee experience, but also the overall cost and compatibility with our current software systems that we have in place.
At the size of our town and budget, does it make sense to try and find a software and adapt it to our systems, or to have somebody build something custom for us?
If we were to get into a custom-built system, I think that would be extremely expensive.
Okay.
Edmunds, for example, was pretty expensive already. I believe there was somewhere around $80,000 or so upfront cost that we had to pay for licensing.
Wow.
On top of that, we're paying, I think, somewhere around $12,000 per year in service costs. And yet we don't get free support. We have to pay extra if we want support and training. So they're definitely nickel and diming us. But if we were to get into a custom-built system, you would potentially be talking hundreds of thousands of dollars just in upfront development costs. I think probably our best bet would be to interview some of the bigger players in the game, maybe interview some local companies. Kevin and I actually have already spoken with the mayor of Cramerton. He works for public software. They have several offerings that I think could possibly be a good fit. But I would like to interview at least 5 separate companies for each module that we're planning on replacing. That way we have a good idea of what's out there. We can compare costs more effectively. Just get a better overall view of what we're dealing with. From what I understand, when the process was underway for Edmunds, once Edmunds was seen, that was kind of decided as the one that we really wanted. So there wasn't a lot of attention that was paid to the other vendors at that point.
Are we locked into anything with Edmunds? Will there be any sort of financial repercussions from extricating ourselves from that relationship?
So that's where it gets very interesting. When I took over the account management for Edmunds, after our previous finance director left, one of the first things that I started doing was looking into the contracts because I had actually never seen it. That's part of what my role is at this point is managing a lot of our software and technology contracts, so I want to be aware of what it was and the time frame on it. We don't have a copy and they don't have a copy. So neither party has a signed copy. And that was told to me directly from, I believe, I'm trying to remember the gentleman's title, but he's essentially the president of, I think, accounts and account management. So if anybody was going to be able to find it, it would be him. So at this point, we do not have a signed contract.
That'll make it easy to get out.
I'm certainly no attorney, so I'm not sure what the specifics of that would be, but I would say, in my opinion, if there's a signed contract,
Well, there's a contract, because it's just, there's nothing, you all are acting like there's a contract, and so, the court will generally imply, but, there wouldn't be like a term, right? You just have a bunch of default provisions or provisions based on how you acted, so I don't think there'd be any sort of like, if this is a 3-year contract, and if you terminate, it's gonna be X thousands of dollars for every month that's left on the contract when you do. It doesn't seem like there'd be any of that, so it would seem like it would be relatively pain-free to extricate yourself because there wouldn't be any, does that sound right, Parks?
Yeah, it's sort of like a month-to-month in lease?
Yeah.
How long have you been in it?
At this point, I believe, I think it was 2019 maybe, when we really were fully transitioned to Edmonds.
Jeez, so you guys paid, so we paid $80,000 for 2 years.
It was either middle to the end of 2018 or early 2019.
Something cost.
Jeez.
We paid for it up front initially.
We
This
paid
is what
a
happened.
license fee up front and an onboarding fee of somewhere around $80,000, and then each year after that, we have service costs we have to pay that are somewhere around $12,000 to $13,000 or so.
That's the contract. If you don't pay those, then we part ways. It's all about that annual contract.
Well, when is that payment due?
We've already paid it for, I believe, this fiscal year.
Well, then wouldn't it make sense not to, would it make sense to plan the transition for like July or something?
That's what I would like to do is,
Yeah, I
I'd
think
like to
that-
get that process underway and start trying to plan it, go ahead and have a decision made on a new company or companies, depending on how we need to split that, because there are so many modules that are on Edmonds at this point. But I would like to have that process underway, so we go ahead and start getting whichever new provider the data that they need. and start.
Does it necessarily make sense to have like 5 different companies doing the 5 different things, or?
What I would like to do optimally, it's difficult to find one suite that's going to do everything that you want and do it well. I'm fine with, for example, trying to marry our finance and accounting and our utility billing together, just because there are so many funds that come into that potentially. If we need to split that, we can. But I would say I don't want to do more than 2 separate vendors for the things that we're going to have to replace. We'll certainly look into the option of getting somebody who can do everything. But my intention is definitely not to split this into possibly 4 or 5 different vendors. I would like to keep it to a maximum of 2 if possible.
Well, yes, go for it and do that if you need our blessing. I'm assuming we're all.
Yeah, well, I was just wondering, like, what would our involvement need to be as far as like authorizing contracts and stuff like this?
You would need to approve the contract, but, so we're still in the information gathering phase of it, and so we could bring you a proposal. That's what we did last time, Michelle had done the research on the finance, Deborah did the research on the payroll or the HR side of it, and we brought those to you, and then you authorized them. But it sounds like there's consensus to let these guys proceed with.
Sure.
Well, if we
Shopping.
want to have it ready to go in July, we need to start.
Because we need to do it, because there is a transition period.
I'm just a little surprised that, it seems like a lot of financial software out there that you can download stuff or export it to an Excel spreadsheet and then upload it to another system, and then, like, why is everybody else able to do that except the government?
From what I understand, we found this out after the fact too. We had apparently paid several $1,000s to a coding company after we made the transition to Edmonds, where this coding company was supposed to have done a custom-built code to allow it to speak with Paycor. That company was a third-party company who also went through a buyout. Apparently our payment and everything got tossed to the wayside. The only person who was aware of it at the time that transaction had taken place was our previous finance director. So after Langston came in and was looking through some emails and trying to figure out, kind of what the issue is, with the hang up there with that software, he discovered that there were some talks that had taken place with a third-party company that fell through apparently.
So did we give them money and then they didn't provide the code that they were supposed to?
It appears so, and from what I understand, I don't know that there was a contract agreement that was signed. I can look into that for sure.
Langston found a signed agreement.
Do we have any, is there any way to recover or attempt to recover? It sounds like, I don't know what the payment was, but it sounds like it was substantial.
It was around,
It was right around $4,000 or $5,000.
something like, yeah, a couple $1,000, several thousand.
Okay.
Yeah,
I
Langston,
wanna say it was around
yeah, I wasn't aware of this, and so Langston showed it to me a couple weeks ago. And so he's contacting this company because we will need to get this data conversion. So if we pay for it.
It's like,
That's how you get your money back, is if they don't perform, then they've breached. But,
it's anytime I try and pull together anything, Excel seems like a place where you
Yeah.
dump it and then you pull it back. I think simple is better. Because simple, if we start real simple, we can build it out. But if we start out here, I feel like we'll be right back here in 2 years saying, just start here and go that way.
for example, that was the way that our previous finance software operated, with payroll, is there was an export and import process. A lot of the things that we exported and imported into it wasn't an Excel document. We essentially provided, the opposite provider that was gonna have to provide us with that document, the format and the coding format it was gonna have to be in, and they would essentially set that up for an auto export. For whatever reason, apparently Edmunds has some issue with that between them and Payroll. There's been some hangups there. I'm not completely familiar with all the details. I just recently took over the management of this account, so.
Well, I won't belabor it, but just like TurboTax and Tax Act, they can download financials from any bank or financial institution and then upload it. And like humans do it, like on a regular basis. There's gotta be an easier way for us to address this long term than trusting everybody else.
Seth, do you think that they're not paying attention to us and helping us out because of the fact we paid in advance? Does that have something to do with it?
I really, when we're dealing with software companies, my personal opinion is I don't like to go to software companies where we're locked into a contract
Yeah,
with a really large onboarding fee, because there's no incentive for that company to continue to perform well. That's why I prefer a software as a service module, which is similar to what our website is. That's what iWork is.
yeah.
There's a little bit more incentive there for them to do what you would like them to do, because they know that at any time you can leave them and essentially part ways. So from a customer service standpoint with those companies, a service standpoint, and a reliability standpoint, they have much more incentive if there's no large contract or a large onboarding payment up front.
That's not
I know there are options out there for both utility billing, and finance and accounting that don't have those huge upfront costs, and it is a software as a service model, so, that would be what I would like to look into, and Kevin shares the same opinion on that as well. But yes, you are correct, that's why that happens when you pay those large amounts up front, is there's no longer an incentive to perform.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
And there's Pennsylvania.
Right. Right.
We can't just drive over there.
We can't, go have a, come to Jesus talk, if you will, with somebody quite easily if they're all the way, up north in New Jersey.
Why don't you go up
Pennsylvania,
there?
so.
Talk to them.
You guys have already used my time efficiently. Yins.
Is there any other questions about the Edmunds software?
I think you've said enough.
You should put that down in your rules to follow, no upfront fees.
And this final slide is just to go over, some savings that's taken place, since my involvement with technology and services. Annual savings so far, this is over the past 18 months, we've saved around $38,000, total reduction in annual costs. Now, those savings are split between multiple departments, and that's a result of contract negotiations, reviews of needed and unneeded services, and corrections made to currently provided services. So, for example, if we were overpaying for certain services, I would go in individually and correct that to what we should have been paying with the right features, which has resulted in a reduced cost annually. And of course, one-time savings, somewhere around $75,000 in total reduction of one-time costs. This again is split between multiple departments. It's a result of a very similar thing for annual savings, reviews of service contracts, projects that I was able to manage internally instead of us having to contract with somebody externally.
And that's over 18 months as well.
Yes. The largest portion of that was the cybersecurity portion of our American Waterworks Association that we're going through right now that we have to do every 5 years. There's an additional review where they essentially go through and give us an overall network map of our network, tell us what our vulnerabilities are for our network, based off of their opinion. And that was somewhere around $55,000 in costs, just for a very minor report of what they were wanting to do for that portion of it. And it was specific to our water plant. Our water plant, the way that it is set up currently, none of our equipment has an external out to the internet. It's all radio frequency, so that would have been wasted cost there because there was nothing for them to really review. There was no network components. Really, the only thing that I've identified as a risk is through our MineNet system. So that's where that savings came from, was me basically saying, no, we don't need to spend $55,000 for this minor review when I can essentially do the same. And I'm hard paid, by the hour. So that was the largest portion of that $75,000. And that is the last slide.
Thank you. Any other
Thank you.
questions or?
Thanks for all your work,
Yeah, that was great.
you know,
You're very welcome.
great increase in efficiency and
Sounds
Save money.
effective.
And I know I've told y'all this already, but we could not have managed working from home and working remotely when COVID hit as seamlessly as we did without Seth and the work that he did on, with Apex and our trend, it timed perfect with our new devices, our new software IT provider company, but Seth made it all work. And, like I said, a lot of little towns just couldn't handle that, and they had to stay in the office, and they got COVID, and
Yeah.
it affected their operations, where we were able to send folks home, stay at home, and work remotely, and had a few glitches here and there, but overall, it was very seamless. So, thank you.
You're very welcome.
I have one question. I know, going all the way back to the beginning, you talked about replacing workstations and stuff, and switches that were really old. Do we have any, I'm just thinking kind of like what we do with the police cars, where you replace those periodically because they wear out. I would think it would make sense to do something similar with our IT equipment, since there are some obvious security risks if we allow that stuff to age, like the fact that we had network switches that were 20 years old is kind of surprising. But, do we have a process in place where we're looking at the equipment we've got and replacing it periodically, so that we're not having huge batches of, ancient laptops and stuff that people are using?
Part of my intention when I was going through with correcting a lot of these issues was an overall IT plan, you could say. A lot of the equipment we've not purchased outright, we've done a lease option to ensure that we can get new equipment every 3 to 4 years.
Okay.
That will include new desktops. Monitors last a little bit longer. We'll probably replace monitors every 6 to 7. Technology doesn't change quite as frequently with monitors to justify replacing those every 3 years or so. But network switches and hardware, firewalls, computer components, I would like to continue to replace those every 3 to 4 years or so. And that's the way our lease agreements are set up. So every 3 to 4 years, we'll review and get new hardware.
Okay.
Do people use desktops or laptops?
We have a mix. We have desktops for positions that are specific to here in the building where they can't really work remotely. For the workers that have the option to work remotely, they have laptops.
And I was just gonna say, I know, I'm trying to think of the best way to say this. I would be open to, when we're doing our, say, P process, if there's some large IT investment that we need to make, I think it would make sense to kind of look at it in that context. Some of these contracts and stuff that are very large or involve the purchase of, expensive equipment or whatever it is. I'm not gonna pretend to know what that is, but I'm just saying, kind of relying on you to tell me what you need, especially around the cybersecurity stuff. I know I think when we talked about this in classes, I referenced some of the training that the league did around that, and how municipalities the size of ours were targeted by Chinese and North Korean hackers and stuff, and have their systems locked out and all that stuff. So, whatever we need to make sure that doesn't happen, I definitely would be interested in hearing what those options are when we're doing our budgeting.
Okay.
Thank you.
There are definitely some improvements that I think we can still make. I've tried to do it once a month, but along with everything else I'm handling, that doesn't quite happen right on the month. But I have sent out a few reports to Adrian and Kevin as well, kind of detailing where a lot of our threats are coming from. We've seen a significant increase just over the past 6 months. We have a lot coming in from Russia, North Korea, China. We've even seen a lot from Africa. We're definitely being targeted significantly more than we were. So I think there are still some improvements that we can make to really bolster our defenses.
Do you know Travis at Gaston County in the IT department?
I worked with Travis a couple times. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. He had mentioned that they were working on some things they were willing to share with municipalities last time I spoke to him. I didn't really follow up, but I figured it's much.
Okay.
So, yeah.
I will reach out to him and find out what that is.
Well, maybe you already have done it. It's been a little while, but I assume we're leveraging the relationships if we need to. But I'm sure you're all working together.
We are, especially due to the police department, their IT is handled through Gadsden County and City of Gastonia. So quite frequently, I'm on the phone with them to ensure that certain things are getting taken care of properly. Thank you.
Thanks, Seth.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good
All right, so I know it's been a while since I've done a review with you guys of the various transportation initiatives, and so wanted to take this opportunity to go over where several of them stand, and then if you have any questions, I'd love to share any information I have or take down those questions so that we can research those answers and get back to everybody related to each of these specific projects. So, first one I want to start with is the Wilkinson Bridge replacement. Back in October, NCDOT reactivated funding for this project, which is still in preliminary engineering and design. And so when they did that, what was nice is that that brief pause had given us a chance to look at some bike and pedestrian improvements that I'll talk a little bit more about later, but we were able to, once this got reactivated, start the conversations about how those could potentially be included along with this bridge replacement project that not only includes the bridge, but also includes the intersection at East Catawba Street. And so that pause, while it was maybe seen as a negative at the time, actually resulted in some positive changes for the scope of this project. In February, we are hoping to hear back from a traffic analysis report, which will help us to determine exactly how far down East Catawba Street the scope for this project will extend to. And so with that discussion, again, would determine exactly how far they may be willing to install some bike and pedestrian improvements that we would then link up to some city-initiated projects. So the hope would be that this one would tie into some other things going on that we'll talk more about in a minute. So because of that, staff is currently coordinating with both NCDOT and their engineer for this project to make sure that we're clear, and also to make sure that we are not duplicating efforts in terms of survey work and in terms of engineering work between all of the different related projects in this area. But ultimately, the vision is for these improvements for bike and pedestrian to link to the Abbey Creek Greenway and to the Recreation Center site. So what you see below is a proposed section based on the latest conversation I've had with NCDOT of what that section along East Catawba Street at the culvert would look like. So what they're proposing, and at this point agreeing to include in the project, is a 5-foot sidewalk closest to Kevin Lofton Park with a bike lane on that side, and then a 10-foot wide multi-use path to align on the side of the street that we're currently located on at this facility. And so, depending on how far down East Catawba Street that would go would depend on how far they might be willing to install those improvements for us with a cost share agreement from the city. And so when I get that information, I'd be happy to keep you guys in the loop on that in the weekly report. All right, so Abbey Creek Greenway. So just as a reminder, back in October, council selected a preferred preliminary alignment in order to try to capture some of the visualizations that were provided by ESP. And so with that direction, we directed ESP to go ahead and survey that site. And that work has now been completed, so they're putting that information into CAD now so that we can look at that in more detail and share that with engineering. So what we anticipate for this project is that in late January / early February, likely early February, we will be able to schedule some meetings with the property owners along the alignment. Not every single property owner, just selected ones. So Gaston College, the Armory, and the Adams Bluff HOA specifically are the primary individuals and groups that we'd like to have conversations with, just to make sure that they're on board before we begin right-of-way acquisition and really get their buy-in to the project and making sure it's a success. So once those conversations are coordinated, we would anticipate the land acquisition, construction documents, and permitting work to begin and take place from spring to winter of 2021, so that we can try to stay on target to align with the construction of the Morris's portion of that greenway, which is scheduled to begin in summer of 2022.
How much land do you think you need to acquire?
It is my current hope that by encouraging buy-in from some of the largest property owners along the alignment, the the college and the armory, that we can get some easements. My hope is donated. I know the college is really excited about this greenway, and the armory seems to be on board as well. The other, on the western end, there are about 5 private property owners, single-family homes, that may need some right-of-way acquisition and/or easements granted along that alignment.
That's been factored in, I mean, that's not a surprise that we need to do that, correct?
Right, back when I started, there was about the same number, if not a few more properties that were anticipated to need that right-of-way acquisition, but by utilizing some of the existing right-of-way that's not being utilized along Brewer Street, we were able to try to minimize that number as much as possible. So I wanted to just provide, and I hope you guys can see it on this slide, a general overview of some of the bike and pedestrian improvements planned in this area. I know that connectivity has been a topic of conversation recently, and really to make sure that we're highlighting some of the amenities that we're investing in this area. So each of the icons represents an amenity in the around this location. The red lines or burgundy lines on this map represent a 10-foot wide paved multi-use path. So that's being included on either side of the Wilkinson Boulevard and Bridge replacement as part of that project. Again, when you turn down Catawba Street, there's a 10-foot wide MUP plan on one side and a 5-foot wide sidewalk and bike lane plan for the other. That MUP will ultimately connect to the 10-foot wide paved Abbey Creek Greenway and continue to extend down to the Recreation Center site and curve up and around to potentially connect into the future location for the skate park. And so at both of those locations, in addition to that, we are proposing, there's some dark blue lines that are really hard to see from this podium, but those are proposed street crossings. One is a mid-block crossing directly across from the future rec center location, and another one is a crossing up at the intersection itself at Catawba and Wilkinson Boulevard. So for the Silver Line and light rail update, the project team has selected a location that they feel like would provide the most benefit to the city of Belmont. But they are looking to begin round 3 of public engagement, where they're going to present this alignment as the preferred, but before making that final determination, are looking to hear from the public on their feedback as well. And so that public participation is scheduled in, or it's not finalized on the exact date, but it is targeted to happen in February of this year. And so as a date is selected, we will certainly get that information out by as many channels as possible for engagement. And once we've had an opportunity to hear from the public on what they feel about the preferred alignment, then CATS is seeking a letter of support from City Council so that they can continue their plans and move forward in that direction.
What's currently at the site where they're thinking the station would go?
Sure, so at this site, they are proposing that it would be located right next to where B&T is,
Okay.
along Wilkinson, so it would cross over Hawley on the north side of Wilkinson, and then be targeted for right next to the BB&T building.
Truist.
Sorry, Truist that hasn't changed their signs yet.
So would, I mean, that would be in place of it or alongside of it?
So I don't think all of those details have been worked out yet, but every plan that I've seen has it next to it, with it being at grade next to Wilkinson. So access primarily being from the Wilkinson side as opposed to the Walmart side.
Okay.
So with that, you guys may remember that the city of Belmont, in collaboration with various other planning departments and CATS, received not just for us, but a $920,000 TOD planning grant from the FTA. And so as part of that grant initiative, we're partnering with CATS and their team to look at what are some options for TOD development and what does that look like in small cities and towns? And what could that look like for Belmont? So that's currently being explored. But at the end of that, the hope is that we can come up with, and they can provide us some recommendations to help us determine future land use around the stations, what supporting infrastructure may be needed, how to include some affordable housing measures as part of that initiative, and to look at it from an economic development perspective as well, on how do we attract those businesses, how do we look at financing strategies, all of those things. So they have actually provided us, as of today, some information that we're going to review as a planning department about TOD in small towns so that we can try to share that with you all as well. So I just wanted to remind you guys that that was an effort. I know there's been a lot of attention to desire for apartments near Wilkinson Boulevard, and so this would help to support that initiative once we can get this type of planning underway.
Yes, I think that's sort of been lost sight of a little bit, and I know it was brought up, I think someone made that point in one of the planning board meetings, that, you know, we've sort of tried to steer things to Wilkinson by saying what you can't, what you shouldn't do elsewhere, but I think we shouldn't lose sight of doing, you know, what can be positively done to encourage things in that actual Wilkinson corridor, as opposed to saying, well, let's not allow it anywhere else, and that'll bring it up there. Well, what a positive, affirmative things can we do to encourage that type of development in Wilkinson?
Right, and I would like to say, the other thing that didn't make this slide, but the team that we were meeting with suggested that that white paper and those recommendations could be available as early as 6 months from now, if not sooner. And so we're not talking about a years-long process in terms of getting some recommendations that we can start to look at in terms of how we want to incorporate those things into our ordinances. So just to put that on your radar, and if we get it sooner, certainly we will keep you guys updated in that process. But my hope is that we can then take this study and then dive deeper into our ordinances to see what we may need to do to encourage more transit-oriented development specifically in that area.
So basically what you're talking about, Tiffany, is that they're looking at running the rail line away on the other side of the road from Walmart?
So it would still be on the north side of Wilkinson.
It'll be on the north side, okay.
The north side of Wilkinson.
Okay.
So the station location would be almost sandwiched between Wilkinson and, I am blanking on the name of that connector that runs, that roadway connector that.
Holly?
Holly
Holly.
Avenue, Holly Avenue, yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. So it'll be sandwiched in between those two roadways.
Right by the
for
BB&T.
access. Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
makes sense. Okay.
And to the Mayor Pro Tem's point, as we get into these, we started it with the Build a Better Boulevard study in 2014, but we really have to reimagine Wilkinson Boulevard and think about it as not in what it is or what it used to be, but what it could be. And so,
Yeah.
sometimes it's hard to see past what's there, but we have to see past what's there to what it could be. And
Well, we talked before about how that has not exactly been the greatest gateway to the city
yes,
historically.
we have a good opportunity to make improvements
Mhm.
with proper planning to allow the type of development and to Tiffany's point, on a Belmont scale. We're not looking at South Boulevard with 20-story.
Yeah, there was a lot of naysayers with South Boulevard too.
Yes,
A lot of opposition to that, but that turned out to be a great thing.
right, so that works, their TOD works for Charlotte. But that's too much for us, so we gotta figure out what is a Belmont model of TOD, what's a Matthews model of TOD, and that's what we're working with on that program. So I'm glad to see that you'll have recommendations hopefully
Yes.
later this year on that.
Yes, absolutely.
I know Charlotte's having a very, interesting discussion around funding at the moment. Has there been any sort of similar discussion about what that might look like over here, as far as like, what the ask might be from us?
Are you talking about specifically for transit-oriented development or?
Well, just for the
playground?
Silver Line in general. Cause I know they're talking about doing like sales taxes and some, I don't know, they're going to the legislature and the northern towns are all.
I haven't heard of anything that they're asking for gas in yet. I mean, obviously, we'll have a mile or so of the the corridor within Gaston County. So we'll have to pay for that, but
Right.
I haven't heard of anything. I think, Mecklenburg County's trying to get authority to do some additional taxes for their overall transit program, which includes the Silver Line.
Right.
But they haven't come to us with an ask yet.
And it's not a big surprise, the northern end is not getting what they want, but they were the group that were the rudest to us when we went to speak to get in the process for this. They didn't think we had any value at all, so we're still really pleased that the people who
I
are
remember
the
that.
thinkers are doing something about that. So they're gonna be an issue all the way through.
Yeah.
I think it's safe to say whatever the ask is, we don't have in Belmont.
Yeah, it's gonna take more than Belmont to do it. We can't afford to build a light rail.
I don't know what it is, but it's,
So it's gonna be a countywide effort.
yeah,
Mhm.
we can start with landscaping maybe.
Yeah.
We'll get Ryan out there to.
With Ron's help.
All right, perfect. So along with the Silver Lines, to round out that discussion is simultaneous discussions about a Silver Line rail trail. And so in that, they're still in the feasibility study phase to evaluate what that looks like, not only for Belmont, but as you pass through the entirety of the corridor. And so in the goals of that study, the hope is that they can create a continuous rail trail that it really encourages active transportation and integrates with land development along the refined alignment. They're also hoping that its design and its artwork that's included helps to promote awareness and support for the Silver Line Rail Trail, that it is functional, that it provides an engaging trail experience, all things that we've looked at for our own trail alignments as well in terms of creating a specific Belmont identity. So I was glad to see in those discussions this language being used. And ultimately that it creates unique public space for the neighborhoods along the rail trail and regional residents, workers, and visitors. And so in this one, we want to imagine this facility specifically being utilized not just by residents in Belmont, but really people who are traveling along the Silver Line and or people who just want to use the rail trail facility and how that's advertised for all that is. And so some images just for inspiration and starting points are seen to the left, really looking at how do we incorporate a lot of natural materials and environments, public art, but none of that has been selected or refined yet, and they've been considering about 4 different branding logos and concepts for consideration. So not one has been identified at this point, but just to let you know that this is underway in alignment with identifying where that proposed route will ultimately end up.
Charming, cheerful, and reflective, that's what it says up here.
Yes, so, in looking at Belmont in relation to everyone else along the Silver Line Rail Trails corridor, yes, charming and reflective and cheerful were how they self-decided to reflect Belmont. And so if that vision is different from how you would envision describing, please let me know and I'll share that with the team. But what I did like is that they did choose to highlight some of the brick infrastructure and history in some of those images and our importance of the river. So noting those things as they're looking at high-level feasibility, I think it's important to establishing a brand that really fits with our character.
Well, and Tiffany, I don't think you were here when we were doing this, but when they did the community meeting down at the Gaston College campus, according to what they told us, we were the only community they had gone to that they did not get any pushback at all. So they were really pleased with us, all the team with the CATS group.
Wonderful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we've got a good reputation.
Yeah, we do.
And I don't think I was on staff at that point,
No, I don't
but I
think
was
you were.
able to attend those meetings, so I do have that.
Yeah.
But I love that it was a packed house
Mm-hmm.
over at
Yeah, it was quite impressive.
Another rail trail project I wanted to just give you some updates on, and they're not major ones, but just to continue this as part of a conversation, is that you guys a few months ago did approve or recommend revising the alignment for the rail trail to turn at Woodrow at that section so that we can avoid Circle Drive. And so with that, that's now being sent to NCDOT for consideration and final approval, but they had let us know that we should submit the revised alignment as part of the Spot 6.0 for scoring in the upcoming STIP. And so with that, we have been continuing that conversation slowly but surely, knowing that funding hadn't been restarted yet for that effort, but Moffitt and Nickel has been wonderful to work with and has provided us, in good faith, some revised drawings based on this new revised alignment to better help inform some right-of-way needs so that we can begin some of those discussions and look at how we best address obtaining the land that would be needed if and, I'm going to say when, this project funding is reallocated. The rail trail's northern segments of the alignment are very contingent on NCDOT's plans and timing for the I-85 widening project. The new proposed route would utilize some of the abandoned right-of-way in that project along Belmont Mount Holly Road, as shown in the teal line up there. And then in addition to that, the intersection at Wilkinson and Main Street and the improvements being made there would have an impact on the rail trail. And so with that, we were really excited to hear that the I-85 widening project and all of its associated projects have recently moved into the PE, or preliminary engineering move forward list by NCDOT. So that happened, I believe, late last week, so this is a very new update. But with that update, just wanted to go over some high-level things. So this one's still in preliminary engineering and design, so no final designs have been selected at this time, but that the city noted a preference for the diverging diamond interchange at Park Street from the options that NCDOT decided to retain after some initial study. They're currently noting that this project would start construction in 2025, but due to the recent reallocation of funds, I would say that the timeline is likely to be updated as more information becomes available and based on funding at NCDOT. The plan is currently calling for not only a widening of the interstate to 8 lanes, but new interchange designs at both Park Street and Beatty Drive and Belmont Mount Holly Road. And this project will now be a design build so that it would incorporate the adjacent projects that used to be U38 or U3608 and U5800. We'll go over in a minute exactly where those are located, but those are now planned to be let and sent out for bid at the same time. So a design of all 3 of those and how they interact together. So the U3608 portion is the Main Street Belmont Mount Holly Road segment. This is the segment that I mentioned on the rail trail where we would be utilizing the abandoned right-of-way that currently is Belmont Mount Holly Road to try to become part of the rail trail. And so the wider, more horizontal line would be I-85, and then you can see Belmont Abbey's campus there. And so the proposed, at last design, the proposed image of those improvements are seen on the left. They are trying to revise the design for this interchange and for Belmont Mount Holly Road in order to provide some better connectivity and improved safety in the area. And because it's being led at the same time as I-5719 or the I-85 widening project, the timeline is still for construction in 2025 at this current date. So, scooching a little further south at Wilkinson Boulevard and Main Street, they refer to this as U5800. Again, this will be led at the same time as the I-85 widening project. NCDOT has noted a preference for the Michigan left design that you can see to the left, which would mean that you go straight and do a U-turn if you want to turn left. And so The city of Belmont has let NCDOT know that that configuration is not supported. So we would anticipate that that discussion continues and gets ramped back up now that preliminary engineering has been reactivated. And again, it wouldn't surprise me if NCDOT tries to make up for lost time since engineering was put on pause due to funding. So they haven't given us a timeline on when they're hoping for engineering and design to be finalized. But I wouldn't be surprised if they did a push to try to expedite things to make up for some of that lost time. So as soon as I get information about any meetings regarding continuing that conversation, I will keep you guys in the loop. All right, Catawba Crossings feasibility study. First and foremost, thank you guys that were able to join the launch call. I believe it was last week before last, losing track of time. But this feasibility study is very high level. This is the first public input opportunity. And so I know that there has been some questions related to project specifics. At this point, the corridor is looking at about 1,000-foot stretch. And the goal, one of the goals is to provide about 2 alignments for further study. And so an exact route has not been selected at this time. What they'd like to hear from the public are really how would they envision the corridor being utilized? What are the corridors that are surrounding that, and what are their conditions? What have they noticed? What are some priorities for people that are living and or working in the area in terms of their travel and their travel needs? And if there's any additional feedback that the community, the residents, the business owners, government officials, that anybody would like to provide as these design efforts move forward. So again, we're really early on in the concept, but the more involvement we can get the earlier on, the better in order to get community buy-in for this project, in order to determine if this is something that the community wants or needs. And so there is no outcome that this public input is trying to support. We're trying to get the public input now to help determine an outcome that meets the needs of the community. And so I think that's really important. The other thing about this one is it is a separate project and separate anticipated design of that corridor from the Garden Parkway project. And so while the Garden Parkway project kind of set the tone for that there might need to be a crossing to be considered, here this is seen as a separate initiative, and that's why it's starting early on at the feasibility study level.
I'm sure it's seen as different.
So right now, public comment is open until February 4th. So please encourage anybody that you know that expresses any concerns to please provide that public input. They can do it via a survey on the website. It takes about 15 minutes if they want to go through that. It's through a platform called MetroQuest. It's very interactive, and it is mobile friendly. Or if they just feel like they don't have the time to go through all of those different components or cards to provide input, there is a website, or there is an email address on the website for Randy Yates at the Gaston Cleveland Lincoln MPO, and emails can be sent directly there as well so that feedback can be received. So whichever platform they would be most comfortable with to provide that feedback would be greatly appreciated.
Is that something we should pass a resolution in support of?
Well, we need to have something to support. And
How about an intersection in the southern part of Belmont, or a crossing?
Staff's recommendation would be that we hear from the public before passing any formal resolutions, just to make sure that we can hear any needs expressed and share those with the city council in your consideration of that resolution. But I think definitely as more refinement is occurring in this, the project team may look to you guys to provide a resolution of support that maybe helps to determine which alignment may be preferred over the 2 options that may be presented as a result of that public engagement. And then the Connect Beyond initiative is a regional project that is looking at high-capacity transit corridors and how we can create an integrated network across the entire Charlotte region. So what they're looking to do right now is they recently wrapped up a public input session, and they will continue through a process to evaluate both the existing systems that are in place, what infrastructure may be needed to fill those gaps, and what a total mobility network for the region could look like and how that could function. And so we would anticipate that in the fall of 2021, that those implementation strategies would be presented by that team. But in that project, they are looking for trying to think innovatively about how we approach transportation, knowing that just by utilizing more insular networks at the more local level, that gets us somewhere, but it doesn't get us to the regional connectivity that we may need in years to come. And so one of the examples in this project is the Silver Line light rail. That would be seen as a high-capacity transit corridor, and that's been included as part of the vision in this effort. And then just some other transportation updates. You may remember that we applied for an NCDOT pedestrian planning grant. Unfortunately, this grant was not awarded for the 2020 cycle. However, NCDOT has offered to provide us some feedback that would help guide a future application. And those new applications will become available in February if we would like to pursue them. The Belmont Mount Holly Loop. Our staff is continuing to work with developers that are interested in developing along that alignment and letting them know that they would be responsible for the build out of any of that portion of the roadway that may intersect with their project. And Spot 6.0 submittals for the State Transportation Improvement Plan are anticipated to be released in May 2021, so we'll know about how our local projects may score in comparison to statewide projects in May to be able to look at whether or not those are likely for funding at that time. And if so, then we can follow along in terms of what the anticipated timeline for funding may be. And then the GCL NPO has begun planning for the Metropolitan Transit Plan 2050. That planning process just begun, and so a subcommittee was established, and I am now serving on that subcommittee so that I can stay in the loop and also provide any feedback or input or suggestions you may have during that process directly to that team. So that is where we stand today, unless you guys have any questions or want to, if there's another project that wasn't on my list that you want an update on, I'm happy to provide.
So the widening of South Point Road is one of the projects that we submitted is for Spot 51, correct?
I believe so.
Yes. And that's one that we hear about a lot. And so if you have transportation questions, obviously Councilman Turner is the chair of the Gaston Cleveland Lincoln MPO, so you can work through him. And then Tiffany is our representative for the staff level version, the technical coordinating committee of the MPO. So those two would have the best information.
And I'm trying to keep up to date too. I'm going to probably about every other meeting because I don't want to rain on his parade, but I'm going.
And its transportation is obviously a huge issue for us, so
Yeah.
we'll keep giving you the updates.
Well, and one
as
of the
we get them.
things, just as an aside from this, and I don't know the particulars, you guys know more, but I know when we talked about the light rail, I think a lot of us assumed, I mean, the general public, that they would just keep extending it, but they said, no, you have a separate commuter rail situation. Light rail, you only run about 25 miles, and that's it. So it's a little bit more complicated than I think what we thought initially from just the general public's end of it.
And there are some discussions going on, west of here about what a commuter rail would look like, what that corridor would look like, and how it could tie in with the light rail, and if possible.
And I think the argument for the Michigan left is about the dumbest thing I've ever seen in my life. I hate that thing. Dumb.
They ought to just stay in Michigan.
I'm happy not to make any more Michigan lines. I came down here and I was like, oh my God, you can actually turn left at Michigan. I've never been able to do that before.
Yeah.
I'm hoping we'll have opportunity for public input on that project again.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tiffany. I've
Thank
got
you.
one slide
Thank you.
for this. Can you just advance it? So the next item, I wanted to get some direction from you. As I've let you know, with the vacant planning department building, planning and I guess engineering department building, that building is just sitting vacant right now. We did put a new roof on it. We had some storm damage, so insurance provided a new roof.
Should get a lot of phone calls about that, for a free estimate.
Let me go back. Oh, thank you. And so I've asked Phil Bogan to kind of take the lead on showing the building to see what the market rate rent would be on it based on his Main Street statistics, but also to see if there's some local companies interested in, or local businesses interested in leasing that building to provide us with a little bit of income. And so Kevin Jonas with the Jonas Group is interested in he and his wife Denise have visited the facility a couple times and brought out some contractors and are very interested in having their Jonas Entertainment Group lease that facility. They love the proximity to Nellie's, but also the parking and I think they're renting space in Charlotte now, so they would like to bring that back in to Belmont. So Phil did an analysis, and $15 a square foot is the market rate for downtown based on his Main Street statistics. The building itself is just a little over 1,100 square feet, so we were looking at a rent of about $1,500 a month. And
Right, similar to what we're charging, Chamber to be.
Yeah.
you have a very good memory. That is the number we use for the chamber as well. The $15 a month. So they would like to move in right away, February 1st, and have a lease payment of $1,500. But they would like to make improvements and upgrades, renovations to the interior of the building, a little bit on the exterior, but primarily on the interior of the building, worth about $10,000 for
Used
the
to be
contract.
dentist office.
Yes, sir. It was a dentist office. So, and all we did was just touch up work when we were in there. So it needs an overhaul. So they're willing to do that, and they would like to forego the first 6 months of rent in order to kind of offset some of the cost of those improvements, but then start making that rent payment the last 6 months of a one-year lease. So that would provide us with $9,000 in rent. It would go into the next fiscal year, but then whatever improvements they make stay with the building. So we end up with an improved building. I think that sounds
How long is the
good.
lease for?
It'd be a one-year lease.
Because otherwise, we'd have to notice and have an actual public hearing, and they
If
wouldn't
we
be
do-
able to move in.
Right.
And I think it's also consistent with what we're doing with the chamber,
Chambers,
because you
terms.
said,
Yeah.
let's see how it goes. And so
Yeah.
I would,
Try it.
And if we want to do a longer-term lease, we could do, there's a process we use.
but I think, that was just a few months ago, so I'm not sure how many lessons we've learned from that, so I would be favorably disposed towards doing something similar.
I think it's a
Sounds
good
good to me.
Okay, so the general statutes require that you approve a resolution. You can do it one of two ways. You can either just delegate all that to me and I can negotiate with them and sign the lease, or we can have the specific lease agreement that you would approve
Yeah.
in the
Do we need a
resolution.
motion on that?
Well, I just need direction from how you want to handle it so that we can prepare. If you're inclined to support this lease proposal, then we can have it on the February 1st council agenda.
I just have one, I'm fine with this beyond just
I
one
am too,
question.
Sure.
Because would we need to designate any parking for them? Like, I guess, is it primarily gonna be like office space, or are they gonna have people coming in and going out?
It would just be office space.
Okay.
And so that's all public parking, so they wouldn't have their own parking. There is one parking space that you have that's the 30-minute planning department parking. We gotta take that sign down. We forgot about that. So, but Phil and Kevin have had that discussion, and it meets their needs.
Okay, yeah, that was just the only thing that kind of came to mind, but as long as you got it worked out, that's fine with me.
Is there, these improvements, the scope of the improvements, is there gonna be anything in addition to that?
This is, there may be some small changes to it, but I told them that we would need to approve any changes to it, since it's our building.
I thought would be just kind of like the, what's it called, the Main Street grants that we provide, that whatever improvements they make could be easily transitioned to anybody else coming in
Right, yes.
afterwards.
Shelley, any improvements to that building would be good, wouldn't it?
Yeah, they want to put in some hardwood floors and,
Okay, so
upgrade some of the
Adrian, you don't
systems.
need the resolution until the February meeting then?
Right, we have to do it at the regular meeting, so we
Okay.
can do that.
Did anybody else express interest?
No, he's been doing this since December.
All right.
Actually, I guess since November. So we do have this, I think it would be great to have them in downtown, be a good use and activate that space.
Yeah.
And they'd be responsible for all the utilities. We would still provide, as a landlord, we would do the maintenance, but they would
Oh, we
provide all the
require, like,
utilities.
insurance and stuff for them too.
Yes.
I mean, could they be responsible for all inside maintenance?
They would be responsible if they broke something, but, I mean, if, like, the water heater went out or something like that, it would be ours.
Can we just define maybe like systems that we're responsible for, and then say they're responsible for
Yeah,
everything else?
like my lease spells all that stuff
Okay.
out.
You know, basically, if it's not covered, it's.
You know, like if the light bulb goes out, I have to replace it. If the light bulb goes out on my porch, they have to replace
Okay.
it.
There's a Latin phrase for that, but expressio uniusio something. Whatever is not expressly set forth as excluded or something.
I was saying espresso coffee.
By what we include, that means everything else is excluded.
So if you're favorable to this, I can draft up a resolution adopting this
Yeah.
lease proposal, and we'll work on that maintenance part of it.
Well,
But they're interested in getting started right away with making those improvements and
I
moving
think the
out of
majority
Charlotte
is
and
in favor
Belmont.
of
Oh, we could also rent them some parking spaces for a premium.
All right, so that's all.
They're
that I
about the
have.
same as the lease.
And then don't forget, so we have the retreat Friday from 5 to about 8 o'clock. That'll be in here. And then Saturday, we'll get started about 8:30, but if you want to come in about 8:15 for coffee, donut, or breakfast snacks, we'll do that. We will have dinner Friday evening, and then 1 or 2, depending on.
Are they gonna serve fish Friday?
Oh, we'll work with you on Friday. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Normally, we have staff here on the
They having
Friday.
steak Friday, can we work with me?
We will make reasonable accommodations.
Just make sure we have dessert.
We're throwing out custom orders.
Yes. But I've told the staff, because of COVID, and we'll be in this room for so long, if they don't absolutely just are dying to be here, I'd prefer that they stay home.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Just to limit the amount of people in here during that day. And then, if you have time, you may want to tune in to the Parks and Rec Board meeting tomorrow evening. They're talking about some of the capital projects that we'll talk about again on Saturday. And then the Planning and Zoning Board meeting is Thursday here, but also, live streamed. And they will have 2 new neighborhoods that'll come to you. And hopefully, if there's a decision, a recommendation from the planning board, it'll come to you on the February 1st meeting. So just kind of a heads up on those 2 items.
Be a nice quiet meeting.
Yes, yes. I warned you that all those nice quiet meetings we had last summer and last fall, we were gonna pay for later. So we're gonna start paying for those meetings now, so just give you a heads up on those items. That's all I've got for today, Mayor.
I have one more comment. It's not anything we can do, but it reflects on us. I've heard lots of complaints from people in the town because Duke Power is not providing services that are, in other words, we're not getting good service. In other words, I know even in my neighborhood, they were supposed to connect us up from 2 different parts of the grid. And so the fact that we're having so many outages is really causing people to have problems. So I don't know whether it's worthwhile for us to at least contact Duke and say, because with all the development we're having now, if we continue to have that, it just makes us look bad.
Like
And
we're
so-
in California or something.
I can reach out to Martha Wagner.
Yeah, that'd be
And
great.
see if she has any information, or maybe she can come and present at a workshop of what I think the work they're doing on Lakewood Road and Cramerton is supposed to help with some redundancy
Yeah, good.
in the central
We
part
need
of
some.
town. So, but we can get some information from Duke.
Okay, thank you.
Ready? Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I'll second.
Second, all in favor, say aye.
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 Meeting's adjourned. Thank you.